Thank you for joining us today on Earthfile. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayola Kasim. For years, companies have been given an option to deal with their environmental impact, that is, cancel out their carbon pollution by paying for efforts that protect the forest. That's essentially the idea behind forest carbon offset. If you're a landowner who wants to earn extra from keeping your trees standing, forest offset suits you well. Or perhaps you're a company owner willing to support forest protection initiatives. Forest carbon offsets are perfect for you, we've been told. But I have also learned it is not as simple as this. As with almost everything, it has its pitfalls. Recently in Lagos, the Nigerian Conservation Foundation's 22nd SLA Do Memorial Lecture delved into the complexities surrounding carbon credits and their role in combating climate change. We'll look at the takeaway at the lecture, but we'll also start this program from Kenya to see how the concept of carbon credit works. Just stay with us. Kenya-based company Burn, which produces a range of clean cook stoves, is using carbon credits to help increase the distribution of the product to lower-income families in the region. From wood to charcoal and now electricity, Burn aims to produce more energy-efficient cook stoves to help slow down deforestation and lowering carbon emissions. In Kenya's Kiambu County, a number of tea plantation workers have replaced their traditional 3-stone cook stoves with Burn cook stoves. Lois Wanjiku has been using her stove for the past 5 years and says not only is she saving money because she's consuming less wood, but the change has been beneficial for her family's health.
You save a lot using the stove compared to using gas or charcoal. The price of gas sometimes gets to 1,500 or 18, but when you use firewood worth the same amount, it can sustain you for up to 6 months. Charcoal might take you a month after buying a sack for 2,000. Smoke no longer affects my eyes or gives me a cold because even if I cook with the stove in the sitting room, it does not smoke. The kids will be studying while you're cooking with no issue. Now we must look after finances because the children are in school and need money. Food has to be bought, so the stove is important in enabling us to save more.
Sasa naonanga afadhali hii ndio muhimu. Ndio huwa ina save pesa kutoka kwa mifuko.
Burn designs and produces all the cook stoves in Kenya. They will soon open an assembly line in Nigeria to facilitate distribution in West Africa. Samuel Murekefo, the company's director of innovations, explains that the key to reducing wood or charcoal consumption is minimizing heat loss to the environment.
So our improved cook stoves contain all the heat within the stove, so it reduces the losses to the environment. The aspect of reducing the wood that you burn is actually as a result of reducing the heat loss to the environment. Essentially what happens is that there are some secondary air holes within the riser of the stove. So the centerpiece is called the riser. So what the secondary air does is that it introduces more air into the flame as it rises up to burn any more carbon monoxide into carbon dioxide.
Chris McKinney, Burn's chief commercial officer, said the company recently passed 3 million stoves sold in the region and is approaching 4 million. However, with around 2 million people worldwide relying on open fires for daily cooking, more work remains. Citing a study published in the American Economic Review in October 2022, Chris explains that demand for Burn's cook stoves did not increase when retail prices were not subsidized, despite potential users knowing the benefit of the product.
Their willingness to pay, so the amount they were willing to pay for a stove, was on average only about $12 versus like call it 40 to 50 in a purely commercial model that would be that they would be required to pay for that stove. So there's this huge mismatch that has to be filled. And that's what now our entire business is operating on, finding ways to fill that gap between the actual cost to deliver that stove and the willingness to pay, or the ability to pay, for the mass market. So how we do that is through carbon financing and the use of carbon credits.
The company says a cook stove can go for as low as $3 after subsidy. Bond raised $37 million in carbon finance in 2022.
202. The
company enjoys kitchen performance tests to quantify carbon credits from cook stove projects by comparing a family's wood consumption between traditional and burnt cook stoves. Natasha Kalanda Otolo, Burn's senior carbon manager, then converts the saved fuel into tons of carbon dioxide.
It was fine.
And we have legitimate credits. We don't have fake credits, meaning the process to get to where we have sold a stove to an actual household, and we have followed up with that household to make sure they see the impact. We are not telling them the impact, they see it for themselves. The women are happy and the kids are happy, and that's why we do what we do. So carbon is sometimes hard to understand how it all works, but all you have to do is look at the impact that your technology is having and see carbon as a means to getting there.
The divisive question of how to finance Africa's environmental priorities and carbon credits, like the ones funding Burn, was the major topic at the 22nd SLADU Memorial Lecture in Lagos.
Incentive for behavior change going into the future.
The guest lecturer told his audience that the total annual finance flows to nature-based solutions in 2022 were roughly $200 billion, just over a third, or 37%, of the $582 billion required by 2030. And natural climate solutions provide about 50% of carbon credits. Today, the market is worth $2 billion, while analysis of the value of carbon markets in 2030 range from $30 billion per year to $250 billion per year.
Very excited to get started on the launch of the African Carbon Markets Initiative.
The Africa Carbon Market was launched at the COP27 in Egypt and spearheaded by the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, Sustainable Energy for All, and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, with support from the United Nations Climate Change High-Level Champions. Its focus is to capture more of Africa's potential in carbon markets by addressing the challenges to voluntary carbon market growth and building the foundations for a thriving voluntary carbon market ecosystem in Africa by 2030. The founders say the initiative will focus not only on driving decarbonization activities, but also on driving economic development by supporting energy access, scaling the clean energy transition, protecting forests, improving agriculture, and creating new income sources. In sub-Saharan Africa, approximately 65% of carbon credits issued in the voluntary carbon market are in Kenya, Zimbabwe, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ethiopia, and Uganda, while South Africa operates within compliance markets, utilizing a national carbon tax and carbon trade system.
I think some must be asking, where is Nigeria? There is potential for Nigeria to generate up to 30 million tons of credits annually by 2030. That is according to estimates by Africa Carbon Markets Initiative. So what is a credit now? So it's a certificate on the performance of a carbon project measured by either reduction or removal of carbon dioxide or carbon dioxide equivalent from the atmosphere. So 1 ton of emissions avoided or removed equals 1 carbon credit. So there is no reward for simply having trees on your land. Performance is generated by changing land management system that creates land use and land behavior change.
Between 2016 and 2021, African countries accounted for only approximately 11% of the total global carbon credits issued, with only 2% of their maximum annual capacity for carbon credits tapped. In the period, the demand for African carbon credits grew by 36%. This surge in demand, Kevin Juma said, signals a substantial opportunity for transformative economic and developmental advancement for the continent. But he did not shy away from speaking about the challenges those going into the market face.
We should invest in the development of an entire value chain, carbon market value chain, from designing, financing, capacity building, and trading in viable carbon markets so that we retain value in the continent. As I mentioned, all these are services that we import. We need well-developed mechanisms that deliver maximum return and benefits to the resource stewards, that is the communities and people sitting here, and the collective support of the governments to ensure durable and lasting impacts. Nigeria could play a leading role due to the voice that you have in the regional geopolitical scenario to help us push for an increase in the value of Africa's carbon credits. It would be disheartening that communities have worked to restore their lands over 8 years, and then once they generate the carbon credits, it gets to market at less than $10 per ton, whereas in other areas people are selling at 50 and 70. So African continent seems to be disenfranchised in terms of pricing, and of course pricing differs from project type to another. But with the voice that we have in Nigeria, we could push for an increase in the value for our credits. Finally, there is need for a framework for carbon markets. One, to provide oversight so that people don't continue with the business as usual, but it should also not be punitive to push away investment. The first step is to start with aligning the frameworks with the Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Markets.
The African Forest Carbon Catalyst, founded by Kevin Juma and Ed Hewitt in 2021, has deployed $10 million to support 22 projects in 9 countries, including Nigeria.
The Africa Forest Carbon Catalyst was formed to address the challenges that I mentioned, providing upfront financing, providing technical assistance and operational advice, helping projects to successfully seek investments, and helping unlock more natural climate solution pathways. We've supported 22 projects, and now we are just about to launch the second phase that will be providing later stage financing. We call it bridge funding, to help get the projects to access market. So the initial design was to provide early stage initial support, but we realized due to the current market uncertainties, financiers are not investing in projects. So we want to support the high quality projects that have completed feasibility to get to validation, verification and issuance of carbon credits.
African countries have yet to make adequate progress in meeting their pledge of restoring 100 million hectares of degraded land by 2030. At the same time, Africa accounts for 22% of global wood consumption, and many parts of the continent face a huge wood shortage as population and economic growth drive the need for energy, construction materials, and furniture. Although there is increasing awareness that deforestation and forest degradation, together with agriculture and other types of land use, are responsible for around a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions, many forest-dependent communities simply don't have viable livelihood alternatives to clearing trees. So, fully understanding the drivers and incentives that underlie deforestation is said to be key.
Carbon credits, opportunities and pitfalls.
Over the past 2 decades, The SLA Do Lecture Series has provided a platform for renowned speakers to address pressing environmental issues and propose solutions. The organizers believe the lecture will open our eyes to how to handle the biggest challenge of our time, and that is climate change.
Climate change, which causes rising sea levels, extreme weather events, land degradation, freshwater shortage, and food insecurity. Other human activities that affect the environment are industrialization, air pollution, intensive farming practices, such as use of heavy pesticides and fertilizers, as well as water contamination and pollution, to mention a few. It is therefore important that we pause and reflect on how we can individually and collectively commit to and make a positive impact and difference to these numerous and interrelated environmental issues.
The global community has been talking about the need to protect the world's forests for decades now. Dozens of movements, campaigns and international declarations over the years have tried to underscore the critical role forests play in biodiversity conservation, water protection, climate change mitigation and local livelihoods. With all the signs revealing the globally significant value of forests as carbon sinks, with all the outcry and warnings from international climate change conferences, from studies on the role of indigenous territories and protected areas in the Amazon to the Green Belt movement in Africa, why has mankind not achieved sustainable forest management across the planet, many ask. Some said part of the answer lies in how incentives for forest protection have been set up and distributed.
Excessive carbon dioxide that is responsible for the climate change issues that we're having. So for organizations to be offering carbon credit for people to regrow and replant the forest is actually very, very important. In fact, it's absolutely essential, because this whole climate change issue that was caused by global warming, it's no longer a crisis. It is an emergency. And this is what we're being told by the World Meteorological Organization and scientists all over the world. There's a 95% consensus agreement from the scientists that we have reached an emergency. And eventually, in another sort of 5, maybe 10, 15 years max, if we don't sort it out, we're going to have catastrophic consequences. So it is a really, really welcome initiative to ensure that there is far more forest regrowth.
It has been said that forest conservation must be profitable for forest-dependent communities. This is an important lesson drawn from the experience of REDD+ and broader sustainable land use mechanisms. The global community has also learned that these mechanisms need to engage local stakeholders in developing benefit-sharing arrangements that address drivers of deforestation and forest degradation and articulate clear monetary and non-monetary benefits that local communities can directly access.
We find that Nigeria is fast losing 25% of its forest cover everywhere, not only in the north where you have the desert encroachment and everywhere. That's why I'm happy about this carbon credits lecture that we had and everything, because if you are saying that you can gain carbon credit from replanting and reforestation and whatever, we can make a lot of it from there, because we have those already impacted forests. And for cities like Lagos, that's where your question is very relevant. If you cut one tree, the government wants to insist that you plant 6 trees in place of 1 tree. How, where, you must find how to do it, because yes, there's urbanization, yes, industrialization was part of what caused climate change and stuff. We are not the complete polluters. The global south, the global north started the pollution. But at the same time, we are polluting the earth in other things that we are doing. So if we cut trees to build our homes, we must find a way of reforesting. And that's why they are saying that, all this hydro kind of farming and balcony farming and things that will bring you greens in your area. Whether you build a house with whatever, have some greens around, a small space, or your balconies, plant trees, plant all sorts of things.
And to improve the quality of life of Nigerians, there is a need to have a conversation on the innovations available to help all adapt to the impact of a changing climate.
Nigeria is kind of ripe for this kind of conversation, so that we'll see how we'll push it forward. Maybe this will also serve, one of the things that we also brought it is because this will also serve as a way of innovative way of conservation in Nigeria. Because when you talk to local communities, you want to talk to them about conserving their landscape. And this landscape is where they normally use as their supermarkets, as their grocery stores and so on. And you want to stop them. Yeah, sometimes you provide through funds from donors and things like that. We provide some projects, and then we are able to run some alternatives. But these projects have lifespan. In 2, 3 years, 4 years, even 5 years down the line, the project ends and then they go back to status quo. But these carbon markets will provide the opportunity for them to have funds in perpetuity that will develop and help them to conserve, first of all, conserve themselves by meeting the development targets, SDGs, and also now conserve the environment. Because first of all, we need to talk about human conservation, then we'll talk about environmental conservation. But they're all intertwined, because if we don't conserve the environment, however we try to conserve humans, we will still perish. So that is why Mother Nature is number one. But in doing so, by which these local communities have been doing, they should find some incentives that will help them to be able to even conserve it more. And they're not doing it just for themselves, but they are doing it for Nigeria and they're doing it for the world. And that is why this conversation on carbon credits.
One problem is lack of financing options, because there is a long gap between investment in tree planting, that is, in the sale of wood products. Few institutions are able to provide finance for commercially grown trees. The Africa Forest Carbon Catalyst founders say the project demonstrates how simple incentives and financing schemes can unlock a market that is already there. In addition to the social and environmental advantages of reducing deforestation, local populations also benefit from payments for verified emissions reductions. Through a carbon offset scheme, communities have been rewarded for their forest conservation work, with payment for avoided carbon dioxide emissions. However, many have pushed back against plans to expand carbon markets.
It is a tool, part of the many tools in the toolbox. As I said, all companies must first of all put measures to reduce the emissions, and the residual emissions, they can offset them using carbon credits. So it should not be the main thing. It's part of the tools in the toolbox. I think it's a multi-pronged approach, both at the regulatory level, at the national level, creating infrastructure that attracts investment, creating really systems that provides oversight, because the current market is looking at credibility, issues of unfair, equitable benefit distribution. So once there's a guiding framework that guides how the market is going to be structured in line with the international best practices, then we're looking at the project level. There are best practices that we've seen, really, but it takes time. So it takes time for designing bottoms-up project sort of intervention, where you sit with communities, engage them from the ideation process, and work with them, developing a robust theory of change that will really deliver on robust climate action. So that really takes time. So there is no cutting corners, because we are looking at developing a climate project or a carbon project that will be delivering on permanent emissions reductions for the coming generations, 30, 40, 50 years. So that really takes time. And that's what we've seen. The process of the lag period from ideation to getting projects to market has really been taking a lot of time. But we hope with the technologies, robust remote sensing, artificial intelligence, LIDAR, and others, the technology that is improving, best practices that we are seeing elsewhere, and knowledge and technology transfer, we are hoping we are going to cut short the period that it takes really from ideation to getting projects.
That's our show for the week. Thank you for watching. Our inbox, Earthfile at channelstv.com, is always available for your comments and questions. For me, Ayola Kasim, and the crew here in Lagos, it's bye for now.